of the City of North Kansas City, Missouri, May 21, 2019. Mr. Eric.
Thanks, sir. Tonight, we'd like to have a discussion with the council about Town Square, our open space in the downtown area in between Swift, Armour, Erie. You all kind of know it's kind of tucked away. Some people may not even be that aware of it. It has been used in past years. A lot more than it has been in recent years. We've had concerts and other events there, but as I say, in recent years, the area has gone underused, and so we've been talking at the staff level about ways that we might make better use of that space, make it a meeting space as it used to be, and perhaps spruce it up a bit. So we had some ideas, and we wanted to get your guidance on them so that we might do some further preparation based upon what you indicate you'd like to see. But we do, pocket parks, plazas, things like that are important to a community and can encourage social interaction. And so we do think the town square has a lot of, potential. So we do have some ideas. The first, I guess they fall into two categories. One, we think sprucing it up, making some capital improvements would be beneficial to the area, would make it more likely to be a usable space. So, those kind of things. We have pictures that show the current condition. The pergola, which is the area that provides some shade, is looking kind of old and tired. The furniture, picnic furniture and other furniture in the area is somewhat outdated and old. We think that the sunken area, which at one time contained a fountain, would now be better off if it were raised to grade, at the same grade as the rest of the square. We would make that suggestion. That's not a cheap improvement, but we do think it would be worthwhile. We think opening up the entrance to Town Square off of Swift, and there are several pictures, would be a useful thing as well as other landscaping that's there in the area.
When you say open it up, what do you mean by opening it up?
Well,
there?
we think it's awfully crowded there in terms of the landscaping. So we would remove some of the existing trees and look to put in something that would make it more visible, for one thing, from Swift.
Some signage
Yep.
and
Yeah, and then we are also thinking, some kind of public art there, perhaps an archway like the one that we have on the street, but of course much smaller, some lighting. We have not fleshed out any of these ideas very far. We wanted to get your general feeling as to whether you support these kinds of improvements, and if you said you did, then we'd work further on maybe some more specific ideas. We also think it would be nice to, within the square, install some permanent art fixtures, and we also think it might be possible to install temporary, kind of have rotating art fixtures that coming in and out. So those are some of the ideas that we have. One quick question, then I'll open it up. We'll pause for any thoughts that you have before we maybe go into the next part. So on the third page of the memo, there's a map that says Town Square area, which Dave will bring up. That's it. So this is the area we're talking about. So the area that we have is shaded here in green. There is as well a entrance onto it that's not owned by the city, but there is a passageway from Armour into this area, which you can kind of see. It's got some blue structures there in between. And then the area that I was just talking about from in between Swift and the town square is shaded kind of by, not shaded, but bordered in pink. And we actually were contacted not too long ago by NT Realty, which was saying, gee, we're trying to just do some checking, and do you know whose property that is? And we thought it was theirs, but we weren't entirely sure. But we both did some digging, and we did determine that, in fact, that is, in fact, property that's owned now by NT Realty. But they've indicated we've been taking care of it for a long time. We've been taking care of the landscaping, and in fact, they've asked us to do more of that. And they've indicated that they'd be willing to work with us to turn that property over to the city. So that is something that we would recommend that we pursue, especially if we're going to be replacing any landscaping, maintaining it. It would make sense if, in fact, this was part. So that would be that's why that's shaded a little bit differently. But that's the area that we would talk about both having some improvements in and working to acquire. So I'd like to pause at this point and just ask if you have any thoughts about improvements, some of the improvements that we made, or anything else that you might suggest.
One quick question.
Yes, sir.
On that area that we're talking about buying,
Yes, sir.
there's overhangs on that. You know, there's that, you know, go out over that walkway there. Whose responsibility would that be?
So,
I mean, there's,
yeah, I guess and by the way, I think that NT would let us basically have it without a charge. That's my belief. But I think we'd have to look more carefully at all that before we would take over the property.
well, I think it's a good idea to acquire that, yeah.
Question. I agree with the mayor. I think it's a good idea to acquire that, especially if it's no charge and we're already taking care of it. When we were talking about our signage programs and our wayfinding signage then, if we do go further along in this project, would some signage maybe be, I think if we're going to open up the entrance and put an archway signage, that would also be included in this, correct?
So I would think, and we'll be bringing that to you soon too, by the way, the wayfinding signs.
Okay.
But yeah, I would certainly think we'd want to be consistent with what we're doing throughout the city.
Okay.
Tom?
I think if we divulge, I'll call it picnic tables and stuff that are down there, if we can't transfer those down to our side of the.
Yes. In fact, we had that very idea, and that we were kind of planning on that, to be really honest with you, because those, regardless of whether you replace them, they're really not being used now.
Well, and they're
So,
concrete.
yeah, but they would be, we agree with you. We had the same thought, and we think they'd be ideal. And
At
that's,
least the concrete structure, not
Yes.
necessarily the metal structure.
right, exactly. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that entryway off of Swift, some of them trees don't look that healthy anyway. So
Agreed.
they need to go.
I'd definitely be excited at the prospect of reactivating this area. I mean, I think this could be utilized by a lot of people for a lot of town events and really branch out to other locations around there. Do we know, when did we acquire that property itself?
Well, one thing that might do is, you know, Ben, my concern back in here behind these buildings is where the trash accumulates and they have to take the trash out that way. Well, if you create a different entrance into there where the trash can go out that way and the public's not really exposed to that, that would help, you know, solve the problem back there.
I guess we hadn't given any thought to the entrance off of Erie, but I know what you're talking about,
Yeah.
and I agree that that's an issue that we would want to try to look at if we
Yeah,
were going to try
because,
to
you
make
know,
more
we-
public use of it.
We would come in on Erie and then have to walk all the way down to the center square and get the trash containers and push them out. And, you know, they would dribble and leak and everything else. And so, you know, if we could keep the public more away from that area, then we'd be better
Yeah.
off.
Agreed. I doubt that those two areas, the two entrances off of Erie would ever be much more, as far as we're thinking about,
Yeah.
than an entrance into the actual
Now,
rectangular area.
there's another entrance on south, between Hellsberg's and that office building. It's not showed on here.
Yeah, are we aware of that? Oh, yes, sir. Okay, well, all right, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's shown,
Between,
yeah.
but they're off of Erie.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
yes, sir. So
If
there's one off,
up
right,
here
it's shown.
behind
Yeah, so
where,
there's one, yes, sort of a
Yeah.
southern entrance off of Erie and then a more northerly.
yeah, the northern entrance, if we could kind of camouflage that one up to where people didn't use it, then that would help a whole lot, yeah.
Something for us to take a look at.
As far as, I know at one time, some restaurants had come to us and asking about using that space. If we do kind of go forward with the renovations, would they be able to partner with the city on anything, or would that be appropriate or not, or is it pretty much going to be a city,
As we envisioned it, this would be a city
okay.
project. It is it's public property now. When we get to the next section of the memo, I might have, comment on some of the overtures that we've received
Okay,
from the new owners of chapels
okay.
in the past, although we haven't had any discussions with them lately. Any other thoughts on the capital part before we maybe talk about events? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so I agree with all your recommendations so far, and I remember the mayor saying this before about the trash, so definitely need to figure that out. And this seems to qualify for travel and tourism funds, because it would be related to that in my mind.
Yes, ma'am. I've looked at it. Convention, I think it probably could qualify for convention and tourism funds. That fund has never got quite the fund balance that the gaming fund has, but one or the other, either one of those, I think, could work.
It also, we have sometimes not a difficult time, but that is such a narrow focus, travel and tourism or convention and tourism fund, that sometimes I think finding use for that is not always as easy as finding use for the gaming fund, which has really very little parameters. So that would be my recommendation, just because of
I've
that.
thought about that as well, and if we have a decent fund balance. So at the staff, again, I want to make clear that we've really been only very high level thinking about this so far, and we haven't gotten into any really looking very hard at costs, but our thought was that, might say, we were thinking a couple $100,000 might be a reasonable investment here to do the kind of things that we're talking about.
And would that include just the part that we already own, or is that including any acquisition of this other part?
That would, again, our hope would be that the acquisition part would not be a cost to us or not a
Okay,
significant
okay.
cost. So that would just be for capital.
Would we do this in-house or?
We hadn't gotten that far in thinking. I think, a lot of this would be purchases. I suppose
filling and stuff,
I think for example, filling up the hole, we'd have to get a contractor in to actually put the concrete in. So I think a lot of it would be contract, some of them might be staff.
I agree with the leveling of that. I think it's dangerous. If we're not actively using it, people can step in it and.
More wheelchair accessible, too.
So, it sounds like you're positive about the idea of our continuing to, work on that and maybe put something in the budget to help pay for costs. So we'll plan on that. And if you have any other ideas, please let us know. But we'll work on that. The other thing that we wanted to talk about with you tonight would be to try to use it more for events, as we did some in the past. And we again have some very basic thoughts about that. One being that, we could sponsor some events of our own there, or we might work with organizations. River North is one that comes to mind. The Business Council might be interested too, in putting on events, and we could provide some support. And that's actually a proposal that we're going to be bringing to you probably at your next work session to talk to you about what we're calling a tourist initiative, but something where we might be able to put aside a small amount of money to assist with others putting on events of that nature. So we think that that's what we just wanted to give you a heads up that we are thinking in terms of that, and hope that you'll be interested in that when we bring you a further, more detailed proposal at your next work session. And then the last part that we wanted to ask you about, get your thoughts about, would be to expand, the city's alcohol in public ordinance beyond what it is now. Right now, consumption of alcohol on public property is only allowed in Mackin Park by ordinance. That's a change that you made a few years ago. Mackin Park does include the Parks and Recreation Center. When I say Mackin Park, both of those areas, but that's the only area right now in which consumption of alcohol on public property is permitted. And so we wanted to see how you felt about the possibility of perhaps allowing for that to be used for events, not for anytime drinking, but for events that might be held either under our sponsorship or perhaps by others in Town Square. I mentioned chapels. So back when the new chapels owners first came to us with the idea, the request for a community improvement district, and they talked to us about it at the staff level, and they were also throwing in this idea that they would like to use that Town Square space. And even before Jim Chapel had asked the city about possibilities there. And when the New Chapels owner came, they were kind of throwing that idea in at the same time as the Community Improvement District, and we told them we thought those were two separate things. Community Improvement District is really a question about a tax, whereas this question would be something else. So if you were to move in the direction of allowing it, another thing you might want to, we could go back. I haven't had any conversations with them about that lately, but we could explore that as well. But our thought right now is really just to sort of making it an event thing for events that have some kind of city imprimatur, as opposed to turning it over to a private company or a private business. If we did use it for that, we think that some kind of fee should be appropriately charged. We think simply allowing the use of public property for private use is not good practice, but we could consider that further. But we did want to, mainly on the event question, just get your thoughts as to whether that is something you would be willing to entertain. If you indicated that it was, then we could work with the police department and others to craft an ordinance that would properly control that, but also allow for it in limited circumstances.
Tom?
If we changed it into an event space, whatever you want, would they have to come and get a permit from the city stating that we want to use it between this date and this date and this time? We're
Yes.
going to do this with it.
Yes, sir.
And this will also include, if we so desire, possibly some alcohol. Is that
Yes, sir.
only for that specific time?
Yes, sir.
And date.
Exactly. In the same way that you get short-term conditional use permit applications now.
So those would come to a consent agenda
Yes.
for us.
I think that's how we would see it.
And if we did this, then they would have to provide their own security so it doesn't leach out upon the streets and, I'm
Right. If we were doing it ourselves, we'd have to consider,
correct.
how to do the security on our own. But yes, if it was somebody else that was doing the event with our permission, yes, absolutely.
We would want to keep it as much confined as we could to that area.
Yes, and I think the good part of that is that if you look at Town Square, I think Chief Beamer would be better able to speak about this than I could, but I think it could be relatively easily controlled because it's in a fairly enclosed space.
Correct. Okay.
Well, my question is, first of all, one of them was about the security, so it sounds like it's the same rules as kind of the Parks and Rec where they have it there. I would be interested to hear Chief Beamer's comments if he has any on this about the alcohol. I'm kind of leaning in favor of it unless you have some concerns. Chief?
Put you on the spot.
It's okay.
He's used to
The
it.
concerns that I have are really no different than the same concerns I expressed when we started allowing drinking in the park under certain conditions, and the situation is much the same here. To the issue of being able to establish a clear perimeter, this is a good venue where you have access control points where you can limit access to the area. The one thing that we need to remember is that drinking in public is still not allowed anywhere in North Kansas City. We have drinking in public areas, as in the park building, or like at Arts in the Park, or when they have a concert down there, they create a beer garden, and the consumption of alcohol is allowed in that specified space. Here, if you were going to allow a third party to, under a conditional use permit, access that space or lease that space, for lack of a better term, then they would need to create perimeter access points and create a private venue so that people cannot come and go freely with alcoholic beverages. They would have to be consumed in that space. So, I mean, is this a venue where you could do it and manage it relatively effectively? Yes. Personally, I think we probably need to apply the same rules regarding security and things like that we have for the park to Councilman Clevenger's statements. But I can't sit here and say that I see something here that's an inherently bad idea. It's just an extension of the policies that the council's already adopted in the park, and as long as it's properly managed, I think it'll be okay.
Well, it looks like we've done pretty well at the park so far. I haven't heard of any issues, so,
Is there a staff member present at the Parks and Rec building when there's an event
yes.
that serves alcohol? So would we expect a staff member or someone to be present at this event when they're serving alcohol?
Don't know that we've thought.
I don't know that I would, I mean, it wouldn't be probably a member of the police department, would it be? I don't know that we necessarily need to. If we've made clear expectations of the person that we're entering into an agreement with, if they fail to meet the city's expectations, then I guess they don't get to do it again.
Now, this would be controlled by the city and not the park department.
Yes, sir. We don't see this as Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, Jesse had a question here.
I was looking at the entryways are pretty narrow. Could we put a gate or some sort of wrought iron fence across the larger opening and then have a way to enclose the entire space if it would set a perimeter? Or if there was a private event, to be able to close it all off, but also feel open during the day?
I think those would be possibilities, yes, sir.
And one more relating to back to the parks. Have we had any issues since we've allowed alcohol in the parks?
We have not.
Move forward.
So, yeah, are you all right with us? Again, we'd have to develop rules and procedures, but are you generally okay with us pursuing that course of action?
Yes,
Strongly in favor.
I like the gate idea.
that's a good. Yeah.
And I was thinking, you mentioned earlier about the, partnering with the Business Council or River North, and I think if you do that, I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope, right? So if you partner, these aren't city departments, these are separate entities. So it'd be very hard for me to have a conversation of why do we allow River North to have an event there and we don't allow a private party or business or somebody to hold an event there.
Those are good points. And we have had private businesses come to us, and I think I mentioned in the memo, and say, hey, be interested in doing something. And, alcohol was involved. Well, it was easy for us on the alcohol when it's simply not allowed by code.
Right.
We were somewhat troubled at the staff level about just the idea of turning over Town Square without, for an event without some kind of understanding, perhaps, I don't know, again, for cheap humor, use the term lease, for lack of a better term, lease, some kind of an agreement, and probably compensation, because it's public property, and we should be careful about turning that over for private use and private profit. But, yeah, I think it could be available very easily. We mentioned those groups, but no, it wouldn't just have to be that. I think it could be available to private
That would be my
businesses as well.
opinion, is that if it's all or nothing, I like the gate idea as long as it's not like imposing and ominous, like you don't, it's not inviting. I want it to be inviting. But I love that idea, especially because you can post on the inside of it, no alcohol beyond this point or some sort of.
Well, you
sign
can
like
put
that.
up, there are temporary barriers that can be easily set up and then taken down after it's over. So that when it's open, just open during the day, it's completely available.
Parks have used that like
Jesse?
white fence, yeah.
Jesse, go ahead.
To your point about the slippery slope, that's a great observation. The thing we could possibly do is if we're looking to partner with, whatever organization gets picked for this tourism budget, if we have something to allocate, we could have a bid process to say, what would you do with these funds? How would those look? What benefit would we see from that? And then if we're going to have tourism-related events in this space, the group that won the bid could then host those events, if that's kind of the idea, just off the top of my head.
Well, we'll be talking more about that in a couple of weeks. I don't know if we've been thinking about a bid process, but we can talk more about that. But but that's Kim's baby, and she'll talk to you
Yeah,
more
you'll
about
get
it.
hurt feelings otherwise from someone or the
Right,
other.
I do think that it should be available to just about anybody, but with some city inspection.
Sure.
Do you have any, we're done, I think, unless Sarah or anybody has any additional staff comments. Did you have any other comments or questions about Town Square? If not, I think we have our general direction from you.
If no, move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
We got a motion to adjourn?
Okay, 1 minute.
Having a second? Okay.
Consider that
In favor? Opposed?
Go.
put my headache on ice.
Scanlon early.